episode, I'm going to share with you 3 paranormal stories. I reached out on Reddit to 3 people, and they have agreed to let me feature their stories on my channel. So firstly, I would like to thank them very much for the opportunity. I really did like the stories. And without further ado, let's begin. The first story. I've only ever mentioned this to my mom, who has had strange experiences herself, and who I know would believe it. Yesterday, my parents and I were looking for a film to watch, and we settled on The Grudge. With all the spirits and entities in it, my mom and I began discussing strange things which have happened to us. For example, stuff like footsteps we've heard. I live in an old hamlet, and up the road from me is an old manor. My dad is a history buff, and when I was little we were driving home at night when he stopped the car to look at the old manor. I was in the back of the car, and about a minute or so after we had stopped, I looked out of the window, and a figure began to rise up in the dark. It wasn't a very dark night, and the headlights were somewhat lighting up the hedge, but this black figure rose up from the darkness against the hedge, facing my window. He had a helmet on, just like a British World War I soldier's helmet. I was absolutely terrified at this point, and I was screaming at my dad to drive. He drove off, and we went home, but it always stuck with me. The manor near me is very old. It dates back to the 10th century, and I know, historically, that people have died there. It's documented online and in local history books. I researched it a few years back, and I have discovered that a medium went there. She said she felt a woman waiting for her son to come back from the war, and that her son walks the road leading to the manor, searching for his mother. I was 6 or 7 when it happened, and I've had other experiences since, like hearing loud footsteps in my home. Like many other towns and villages, my parish lost many people during the war, and we have a war memorial near the church. The second story. It was Christmas Eve, 2019. I'd gotten into a drunken argument and had to spend 24 hours, which was the Christmas day, in an empty, silent cell. I was hungover at the time, and I had been beaten by the police for exercising in my cell. Well, after staring at the blank walls for so long, in a state of utter misery, I saw fairies. I do not believe in fairies or anything else paranormal, and yet there they were, flying around my cell. Little female figures with dragonfly wings. They never spoke, as far as I can remember. They just flew around the room, and I played with them. They were semi-transparent, colorfully dressed, and I could not touch them. They were about the length of a hand, around 10 inches roughly. They had come to keep me company and keep me sane, I decided. I saw them only for a minute or so, and then they were gone. After this, I decided they were merely figments of a traumatized and understimulated mind, as jail cells are designed to be unpleasant, and the mind can create things in those lonely situations. I never saw them again, until this morning, exactly 2 years later. I awoke this Christmas morning to the exact same fairies flying around my room. I saw one clearly. She smiled and flew around me, and I remembered her like an old friend. My mother entered my room, and in a haze I told her that the fairies had come to visit again. She assumed I was dreaming, but I was very much awake. Where I live, which is southwest England, fairies are something many people believe in and have done so for centuries. After the first event, I recently visited a nearby haunted jail, the Bodmin jail to be more precise, and learned that one old woman escaped her cell with no plausible explanation. For the rest of her days, she swore that fairies had helped her. But to me, they are nothing more than fiction, something I never even think about. I suppose it could be some sort of trauma, as every Christmas Eve since then, I've had nightmares of running from the police like I did that night. I like to consider rational explanations, but then I'm starting to think I believe in fairies, and I hope that they'll visit me again. Normally I don't comment on the stories because you can't possibly deny or accept anyone's story because it came from their perspective. However, if those were fairies, I have to tell you that the fairies aren't good entities. In fact, someone once said, and it stuck with me, that they are the spiritual mafia, and you need to be very careful if you want to interact or work with them. So I just wanted to say that as a warning. You can obviously do your research and ask someone that's a bit more experienced than me in this area. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that before we move on to the next story. The third story. I live in a country where every doctor that wants to go into a medical specialty must take a national exam and compete with every other doctor in the country that wants to study a medical specialty. Something like the USMLE in the United States. It is a big deal, and everyone that goes into med school here knows that your future kind of depends on an exam score that takes place once a year. My mom had died 3 years before I took that exam while I was still in med school. She was always a very caring person and was really proud of me. I am the youngest of 3 brothers, and she always saw me as her little boy, even when I was in my 20s. During med school, I always wanted to become a nephrologist, but after my mother passed away, I went through a really bad episode of depression that made me pause my studies for 6 months and eventually made me change my specialty choice to psychiatry. After I realized the hell of mental illness, and I wanted to help people not to go through that alone. All those years I constantly felt the presence of my mother, like she was still around in a good way, always taking care of me. It's hard to explain, but I just felt like she was still around somehow. A few months before that big exam, I had a dream in which I was taking that exam. The lady that gave the scores in my dream handed me my result and said, "You got a total of 76%, but your mom graded your exam, so now it is 86%. I woke up with a happy feeling since I thought it was funny, and I enjoyed dreaming about my mom. I told my family about it, but we really didn't think much of it. The day I took my test, I was feeling nervous, but I was confident enough because I really had been studying, somehow felt that things were going to be okay. After I finished my exam, the lady that handed out the scores printed out my results sheet, looked at it, then at me, and said, "Congratulations, doctor. Usually you need a score of 70% or more to get into a specialty, but the better score you get, then it will help you to choose a better hospital to study at." So I took my results, and to my surprise, it said total score 86%. I was baffled, first of all, because it was a really high score, and secondly, later that day when I was celebrating with my family, we remembered that it was the exact same score from my dream. It is even more surprising because of the decimals. There are more than 450 questions on the exam, so you can get scores like 74.36% or 82.72% or something like that. But this one was exactly 86%, like my dream months before when my mom graded my exam. After that day, which was 4 years ago, I didn't feel the presence of my mom as strongly as before. I know she's there somewhere watching me and my family, but I think she chose to stay a few years before leaving, just to make sure I was going to do fine in life, since that was one of her greatest worries as a mother in relation to me and my brothers. If you do like these storytime episodes, I also have a Spotify podcast, so you can listen to them there as well. You can find all the links on my YouTube channel in the banner up top and also in the description box below. But I want to thank you very much for listening in to my stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps a lot, especially the smaller channels. I wish you a very good day or night, and I'll see you